Yeah, so if that will play, then we're in great shape.
This will play, but there's still no audio. So you'll have to narrate kind of the message. Would you like to wait just a moment to see if we get a couple stragglers?
Sure, that's fine. That's the MP4.
This is the MP4. Okay. Unless if you have questions on that, we can try to make sure we.
Let's go through the talking about it. And so let's click on that one right there. See if that will load. Then maybe we'll get audio. Take a second.
It is huge.
There you go, that may play. And there's no audio at the very beginning. So let's just click over here and see if it's on.
Yeah, I had the IT team come in and try. Yeah, I already did. We tried to troubleshoot it already. I brought an IT. We just couldn't. Okay. So I apologize for that. Come on in.
Yeah, start at the beginning.
So there's a little gerbil running around inside the computer connected to this, so it's not. There might be a little lag time. We've got a few more people. Oh, okay. Well, I don't want to get them behind on their overall presentation schedule, but I figure if people are here to try to see this, we should give them a chance to get here.
So John, you're from Detroit. What do you think of Nicole Curtis and her kind of her philosophy of how she goes towards restoration?
That's a tough question for me because I'm a historic preservation neophyte. I think that anyone that's actively trying to bring back, buildings that have been put to use for 50 years should celebrate. So, bringing attention to that is so. I haven't watched her show all that much, but in general, I'm supportive. That Brush Park neighborhood where you see like really elegant Victorian homes that I think she's had a few episodes on. There are literally entire blocks with one house. It's been an area of such like dramatic disinvestment for so long that in my lifetime, none of those buildings have ever been occupied. So to see them come back is really amazing. So I don't know that much about her as an individual or her philosophy, but I think that just the amount of progress.
She's very pragmatic, I guess. That's what she does.
Okay. So I'm personally a big supporter of Detroit, and I'm obsessed with it. So if anybody ever wants to talk about historic preservation in Detroit and seeing the city's rebirth, come bug me. All right. Why don't we get started here? Wonderful. Are we good to go?
Yep.
All right, wonderful. Well, welcome to the 9th Annual Historic Homeowner Fair. This is sponsored by Wood Window Makeover, which is a window restoration and reproduction company out of Florida that has a presence here.
Can you speak?
Yes, I
up?
can. I apologize.
Thank you.
So I have the honor of presenting Guy Chipman. Wood has a background in engineering and a degree in architecture. He has been in this neighborhood for a long time. He's built a successful company here. Very wonderful individual who supports our office and our efforts consistently. Really puts time and effort into our hands-on preservation activities, and I'd like to commend him for that. Woody started with Fisher Heck and had a role in historic preservation in that field. Has done a lot of both design and construction, and branched out on his own in 2002 to start Guy Chipman Construction, with a focus on both design services and construction of historic homes. Woody has an incredible amount of knowledge on wood window restoration, appropriate methods for historic homes, and he has great experience with some of our area's most significant historic buildings and resources, including the Herf House, Stillwell Farm, or the Stillwell Home, and the Castroville City Hall. So this is an opportunity for Woody to tell us a little bit about this incredible restoration of this historic resource. Thank you. So Woody, I'm going to hand this off to you.
Okay.
If this is where you're comfortable,
Okay. That'll work.
this thing rolls so you can go where you want. And if you'd like me to just press play.
Sure. And hi, I'm Guy Chipman. Good morning, everybody. Glad y'all can make it. And this is the Stillwell House, and it's a national landmark. And it was the head of it was the commander's house at the infantry post at Fort Sam Houston. And back in February of last year, April of last year, a windstorm came along, and there was a porch right here. And that porch lifted up, the legs went out from underneath the porch, and it was connected up there, and the porch fell. It did a backflip, and it ended up upside down, crashing into these railings. And you can see where the posts were attached. It crashed into the air conditioning. And this is the summer of 2016, or when we took it all apart. And we took it apart piece by piece, the porch that collapsed. And we salvaged as much of the historic structure. And this is what it looked like before the collapse. And this is what it looked like after the collapse. And you can see that it was just broken up into pieces. And you can see that, these columns, what really caused this collapse was the fact that these column bases were not properly attached to the porch floor. It was just a couple of little nails nailed in. And so when it came down, it just almost destroyed the whole porch. And so at this point, I'm working on taking it apart piece by piece. And what I'm doing here is I'm driving wedges in between the framing and the roof deck to try and separate it. You can see it's upside down now, so it's a little confusing, but this is where the built-in gutter was. And this is the fascia out here in the crown mold. And you can see the little square nails that they used to put it together. That gives you an idea. This was built in 1888 originally. And you can see all the little square nails that were used to put it together. And so I'm carefully going in here and driving wedges in. And as I drive the wedges in, this piece of framing lifts up and it separates. And it takes it apart without breaking it. Because I wanted to reuse, we were able to reuse about 80% of these rafters. Some of them we had to cut down, use a longer rafter on a hip and shorten it and move it over one and to have enough wood to do it. But our goal in historic preservation, especially in a situation like this, is to preserve as much of the historic fabric as possible. So we had to make, about 150 feet, 200 feet of new beams to support this, but we were able to reuse probably 300 feet of the original framing structure. And this is just a careful way to take it apart without destroying it. We also were able to reuse, this is the old bead board decking here, and you can see where it had beading at the edges of it. It's a little more clear right there. It had so many layers of paint on it, the beading had all completely filled in. And we took that bead board, you can see it there real clearly how the bead is, and we took it all apart, cleaned all the edges, sanded it down, got it back to where it didn't have marks where the paint had built up and the hips were, and then we were able to reuse quite a bit of that original material. And we learned so many lessons on this project. There had been prior repairs done on this project, we'll see that in a little bit, where they had used modern treated lumber to replace this longleaf pine. But the treated lumber did not have the structural strength that the longleaf pine did. And it actually sagged, like one of those rafters sagged 4 inches in the hip where it had other framing bearing upon it. the strength along the pine is almost like 70% stronger than the yellow pine that we have today, because it was an old growth timber. It grew slowly and very thick, dense deal. And in this part of the film, I wish the audio was working, because right now the clock is ringing 12 o'clock. And so that's the one part I wish we had. But we were right there. That's the quadrangle. That's the clock tower at the quadrangle. It's just across North New Braunfels from the Stillwell house. And we were always, it was part of the background. You have a little bit of artillery pieces and stuff like that on display. This is the museum for Fort Sam Houston. Is it the AMED Museum? What's the name of it, Joe?
That's the Fort Sam Houston Military Museum.
Fort Sam Houston Military Museum. They have wonderful displays. I encourage everybody to go check it out. You can go and park at the quadrangle, and I think you can go in from there. Is that correct? Thank you. Okay, so now we've scaffolded up, and we are up on the roof, and we're looking at the built-in gutter system. And this gutter system runs all the way around the house and is part of the overhang. And this gutter system was damaged by hail. And it's one thing that we really were able to help the Stillwell house with. When I discovered that there was hail damage there, you can see the seams here in the gutter system are cracked. And when these seams crack, due to both the combination of the hail abrading it and then heat and cold expansion and contraction, the water trickles down through that gutter, and then it ends up underneath, and it starts to destroy everything below. And if you look underneath here, you can see that the soffit is completely rotted out, and the downspouts over here, but there's no rot over here where there's the downspout right there. But the rot is over where that seam was, and that water worked its way down, and it actually compromised this beam in here. It compromised the fascia, the crown molding, the overhang, just because of these cracks in here. And you can see this is the main house. In this area, we actually had water damage on the inside of the house where that water had gotten into this overhang and then trickled back into the house and just destroyed the plaster in other areas. And we were just lucky. I happened to be leaving one afternoon when we first started the project, and the sun was shining on the surface of the roof, and I could see the dimples, and I went, well, they've had hail here. And at first this was just the case of a collapse of a building. But then when we realized that they had hail damage, they had insurance coverage. The insurance coverage covered a lot of this. They covered the cost of the scaffolding. I don't know that all insurances will do that, but we were able to get them to cover the cost of the scaffolding. They covered the replacement of the gutter. They didn't cover rotten wood, but everything connected with the roof, the insurance company covered. And it was huge. There was other areas where it actually abraded the paint, and we were able to get the insurance to pay for the lead paint abatement. So that was enormous. This is after we've taken the metal roofing off, and you can see a little bit of how the gutter is made. This is a crown mold, a cap, slopes down into there, and this is where that crack. That's that same seam, and you can see the destruction that water has caused, and you can trace the path of that water from that seam down into the overhang. We're probably about 35 feet up in the air right now. It was so advantageous to have these scaffolding because this house had been repaired several times in the past, and they just kind of added little blocks of wood here and there, and so over time the overhang had gotten very crooked and waved up and down and in and out, and so we had to kind of lift it up and straighten it up, and so now we're digging a little further into the overhang, and we're starting to find out that, wow, we've not only is the fascia and the soffit rotted, but the actual rafter tails themselves have been destroyed to the point where there's no wood there. You can crush that with your hand. And so we had to figure out a way to support the overhang because there's a lot of weight out there with the gutter and everything when it fills up with water. So what we did is we created some special blocks, and I'm about to pick up the blocks here. We called it a Z-shaped block. And we just kind of figured this out as we went. This block actually locks into the beam and the good portion of the framing back inside of the overhang. And so we kind of have to wiggle it into place, and it makes a funny noise when we do. I wish I could hear that. It goes squeak, squeak, squeak when we get it in there. But so this thing locks into place, and we reached up into the overhang where it was solid wood, and we put some big screws in there and screwed it into place, and so it would support the overhang. And then it locks right in there. And then I said, Jimmy, we need to adjust the angle just a little bit so that it lines up with the tail, so that our fascia would stay plumb. And but you can see, like, this column capital was even compromised here. There's a little bit of crushing in that capital, that water leaked down. This is the other side of the house. That was the west side of the house, and we're on the east side of the house now, looking at an area where it was extremely damaged. And there was all this debris in the overhang. Shingle debris from a shingle roof in the past. You can see that those rafters are just crumbling in my hands. And so we had to do a lot of work just to get ready to re-roof this building. And what we had to do is we had to keep it dry as much as possible during the process, because all the water from the roof ran down onto the porch roof and then ran into these gutters. So, we didn't want to do any more damage by exposing the building to additional water down inside of the overhang. And so this is temporarily dried in with a peel and stick underlayment, and we had sections that we could pull back and work on it and then put back down. And luckily the weather was very cooperative. But if you look, when we get down, you can see this overhang. It's just like up and down because the repairs were poorly done in the past. And they had a large quarter round molding here, you can see, and it had been replaced with a small quarter round molding with a piece of screen mold on one side and a piece of screen mold on the other. So we actually milled the original molding. And then here in this area, the beam was destroyed by the water that got back into the overhang. So it wasn't just taking out the overhang, it started working its way back into the structure. And you can see the damage to this column capital here. You can see there's a little bit of sag in the beam there. I always say that, there you can see how much the overhang goes up and down. I always say that fire burns up, but at the same time water burns down. It works its way into the structure, and it kind of bangs off of different things, and it spreads out and causes destruction within and here we are, we're replacing that beam. So we've taken off the trim on there, and this is an actual longleaf pine. We were fortunate enough to get some longleaf pine reclaimed from the German English school downtown. We were working with a contractor who was doing some remodeling there. They took a lot of the structural wood out and then reframed it to add bathrooms or what have you. But this wood would support these spans and would support the weight of this building, where modern pine probably wouldn't. It's a little thinner, it's just not structurally as sound. And so we were able to lift up, see, I've got it short up here, and we took the weight off of it, and we just tapped this beam right into place, and we're able to roll it into place. Interesting thing about the way this was built, the beams were hollow in the middle. The structure was on the outside and the inside. If you sandwich wood up, it rots more. But if you leave it with an airspace in between it, the wood dries out and it prevents additional rot. And so that was kind of a lesson that we learned from the past that they did on these buildings. They built these box beams, you would call them, where they're hollow in the middle. There's an airspace in the middle and allowed it to dry. Let's see what's next. And so we have to adjust the beam to get it into place. We put some screws into here and we pull that out so it all lines up. This is the hip that I was talking about. This is the modern Walmanized wood. And you can see that curvature of that hip structure. You can see how it's dipping down right there. It's terrible. We put a string line on it. It was 4 inches of deflection in that hip. And we had to get that out of there. And you had to take everything apart to get that hip out of there. Each one of these rafters, the barge rafter is tied into the hip structure. And all the wood decking was tied into it. And we had to just about unlace it all, and in one area, this area had been repaired in the past, so the decking had been cut in a straight line. But on the other hip, we actually toothed in the decking like you would a pine floor or an oak floor. And so this beam is one from the German English School, or no, this was from Woodco. It was milled for us to match. And this beam fit it perfectly. We went down and grabbed one out of the pile. I said, that one looks about right. And it was the exact length to the 16th of an inch. And it just dropped into place. And, you know, it's pretty fun. This is Friday afternoon, and I said, does it fit? And they're like, yeah, it fits. I said, does it fit right? And I said, is it Friday afternoon? You ready to go home? Yeah, yes, but it fit perfectly. And see, we had that beam ties into the brick there. We had to carefully cut around the brick to pull the old beam out and then put the new beam back into the brick. And this little gable or hip on the beam itself carries the gutter floor out both directions. And so we had one little, it was hung up right here on that board. And so Ashton had to climb up there and tap it, and that thing just dropped into place. And we're like, okay, we're done. You know, this was a good. Okay, so this is where we're down now. We've already redone the roofs up there. We're working on the lower ports that collapsed. We've already reframed that, and I'll go get some slides and show y'all. This is the garage. It was all the damage on the garage. This is what a built-in gutter looks like before the roof is put on. And you can see how it's a trough. This is the new, we used longleaf pine to make the decking, and this is the reclaimed decking that we were able to salvage. And we, you know, probably got about 30% of that wood from the original structure. You know, it wasn't really a cost savings. It was pretty much a wash because we had to pay the guys to scrape it and clean it and take all the nails out of it and all that stuff. But we preserved the original structure that was in the building from the beginning. And this is my carpenters, Joshua at Taylor Built Construction. And in the background, Johnny Cash is playing. I wish y'all could hear him. It was both John Henry and his hammer and his nail, and it's just perfect timing, the whole thing. So we really literally had about 30 feet of wood left over of this reclaimed wood. So we were very efficient at saving what we had, and I really got lucky. We added structure here. See these steel plates right there? We added plates that went back into the brick that would further prevent a collapse of this building. Because there was only two little plates. Those beams didn't tie into the brick very far. They went in maybe this far. So that was another reason that used up a little bit more wood. You can see old beam, and there's a new one there, just a little lighter in color. But we increased the bearing of the beams. We put them back into the brick further so that they were more structurally sound. And then I think that's the end of the video portion of it. Let's see. PowerPoint. Okay, so what do I do? Advance. Just arrow. So here it is before, and there it is after. And this is just kind of going through some, you know, it was just twisted, mangled. And you can see there was a steel plate here, and I think there's one right over here. There was two of them. And so we increased the number of steel plates, and you can see those sills. These are carved stone sills, and they were damaged as well. We had to replace those and the framing as well. So just mangled. The downspouts were crushed. The air conditioning. We were able to get the insurance company to replace two of their air conditioning units, and because they were R22, which was no longer available. There was parts were not available for the units, so they got free air conditioning. This is the cause of the collapse right here. One nail here, and maybe one nail there. So those columns, when that wind blew, that porch was like a sail. columns went out, boom, they went like that.
Was that a remodel mistake or was it built that way?
It was a remodel mistake, yes. Those columns had been replaced with treated lumber. And so here we are, right after the collapse. This was early in the summer of 2016. And there's John Manguso, who's over by my booth, and he's actually out there helping us take the nails out. And he has made a plaque for me with one of the nails that we salvaged, and he sells the nails to donors to help raise money. And you can see how we had to take it apart piece by piece. And here's that interval gutter again. You can see how it's notched into there. And you know, in my video when I first made this, I'm saying, well, this is really crude framing. It wasn't crude framing. These guys were excellent carpenters. And I mean, I was very impressed. There's the sills that were damaged, and there's that anchor plate that Mo was talking about. This is what keyed me in. This is what, when I saw the dings, this is when I was leaving, I saw those dings on the roof and on the quadrangle. Ding, 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 ding. I went, man, they got some serious hail out there. And look at, this is the sidewalk. And this is the impact of the hail. And that's I have a wide foot, you know. So that hail is like that big. And it really did some serious damage to the whole building.
I have a statement.
Yes,
I'd like
please.
to, what Woody walked into, and for many, many, many years, when the private foundation took custody of that building, it ran into the constraints of the budget crunch in the military. And for a house that size, that age, for about 15 years, they were restricted to $3,000 or less